It's alive! It's alive!
It's alive! We are live and it's casual.
It is not often that I get to do a Colin Clive impersonation from Frankenstein. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
It's alive! Jonathan, it's casual. Bring us in with a little music.
It's casual.
Bring us in, buddy.
Damn. I figured I'd just stop while I was ahead. Because
you did a Jake Allen.
Yes.
You did a Jake Allen there.
I had to back out of the hole sometime.
It sounded good. I liked it.
Everybody take a shot.
It
was good, Jonathan. It was fine.
Picks, every time I play it, they just get hung up in the thing because there's like a 1/4 inch worth of a gap between where it ends and where the flat part is, and it just keeps getting strings caught. You didn't ask for any of this information, but you're getting it anyway. So
I'm going to be like Paul Anka and beat up my band in a minute.
You Paul Anka me. Don't you Paul Anka me.
Oh, God.
Okay,
and on that rousing note.
Again, we were doing a little talking before the show with our guest.
Yes.
He's got juicy stories. What can I say? I am so excited tonight. This is a very special episode of It's Casual. We have a music legend amongst us on this show, Mr. Billy Vera. We're going to bring him up right now. Mr. Billy Vera.
Hello.
There he is.
There he is.
So glad you could come on the show and spend some time with us and our friends. And, we're building our viewership. So we're international on 4 different social media channels.
Ooh.
And if you like what happens tonight, and usually we have a good time. Most people come out of here with a smile on their face. We archive it on YouTube so you can tell your friends to go see it.
Oh, great. Okay.
So, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
2021.
Yeah, man.
Oh my God! I just realized I left my notes upstairs.
Well,
so what I'm going to do is ask you a question about your early part of your life when you're growing up. You were born in California, but you actually grew up in New York.
Correct. Yeah, born in Riverside. My dad was stationed at March Field Air Force Base. He was a first lieutenant and a bomber pilot, and he got hurt before they sent him over to the South Pacific. Thank goodness, because that probably saved his life. And then as he was recovering in the hospital, my mom was singing in a little radio station, and her guitar player on there was a young Chet Atkins.
Oh my gosh, Chet Atkins! That's
Really?
incredible.
Yeah.
Holy cow!
That was in Springfield, Missouri. We were there for a year. Then he got an offer to go back to Cincinnati, where he had worked before the war. He was a radio announcer. And then my mom got a job on the same station, WLW in Cincinnati, which was a big deal station. It could be heard. It had a very strong signal. Could be heard from Toronto to Brazil, I think, in 40 states. And a lot of a lot of big stars came off at WLW. Rosemary Clooney, Doris Day, Andy Williams, Rod Serling, the Mills Brothers, Fats Waller. A lot of big stars. But then they left. We went to New York when I was about to enter the 2nd grade.
What caused you to move to New York, if you don't mind me asking?
My dad was what they call the union shop steward at WLW for the Performers Union, AFRA, before it became AFTRA.
Okay.
Federation of Radio Artists became the American Federation of Radio and Television Artists. So but he was one of these by the book kind of guys, you know, and Cincinnati wasn't really that big a union town. So they fired my mother to teach him a lesson, and he still went on being himself. And so then they finally fired him. So he went east to Philadelphia, thinking he heard about a job opening there, and it had already been filled. And so he kept going to New York. And then when he started to get a little work, he sent for us, and that's when we went to New York.
I see. Yeah, he was a radio and TV announcer, right? Correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And your mom was actually a backup singer.
She became a backup singer after she came to New York. Before that, she was a soloist, and she was a pretty well-known person in Cincinnati. She had 11 shows on radio and TV a week.
Wow.
So they worked her pretty hard, yeah. And then but by the time we came to New York, she was 31 years old. And in those days, God forbid, the American public should see a 31-year-old woman. You know? And so she decided to learn how to sight read music so that she could work as a backup singer. And she ended up doing quite well. She was on the Perry Como show, later on the Pat Boone show and the Frankie Lane show. And she sang on all of Como's hit records, you know, Catch a Falling Star, Magic Moments, all those. So
now, that was what I saw in Wikipedia when I was reading about you. It said that your mother was one of the Ray Charles singers.
The original Ray Charles, the white guy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then I saw that it's Perry Como that she was doing mostly backup for on his TV show and on his records.
Yeah, the Ray Charles singers sang backup for Como.
I didn't realize there was another Ray Charles. I'm sorry.
In those days, there was only one Ray Charles, and that was this guy.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
The Ray Charles that became my hero, the one that you all know, he came along and just changed music. To me, that Ray Charles was the most important musical figure of second half of the 20th century. I just love it.
Yeah.
I got to record him, you know.
Really? How'd that happen?
Well, we were doing, we did the first Lou Rawls album we did. I did 4 Lou Rawls albums. And on the first one, we were looking for, maybe some duet partners. And so one of us suggested Ray Charles. And Ray said, yeah, I'd love to do it. So we of course, I called up my old mentor, Jerry Wexler, who was the big cheese at Atlantic Records when I was an artist on Atlantic in the 60s. I said, Jerry, you got any advice on how to produce Ray Charles? He says, man, you don't produce Ray Charles. You just get out of his way and let him do his thing. So we producer of Ray Charles, for one song.
Now, also on Wikipedia, there's another thing that kind of confused me a little bit. It was where you went to high school at. I have Our Lady of Mount Carmel. I have Archbishop Stepanek High School, and you remember that one, so that's one of them. And Sacred Heart School.
No, I didn't go to Sacred Heart. My sister went there.
Oh, okay.
Our Lady of Mount Carmel was grade school, up to 8th grade. And then I graduated high school from Archbishop Stepanek High School in White Plains, New York. Yeah.
So we all remember like a crazy time from our high school. Do you remember a crazy time from when you were in high school?
Not really. I was pretty. I mean, I fooled around a lot in class. Clowning.
You were a class clown?
Well, sort of. And of course, in those days, they let you go to confession. Before classes started, and you know what all teenage boys do, right, at night.
I can get.
So I don't know if I could say it, but
we're on cable. It's all right.
Everything goes.
All right. So anyway, we'd all go in there. We'd confess our sins. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. In one day since my last confession, I masturbated 5 times. And then
teen boys do,
and as they all do, So they say our 5 Our Fathers and 5 Hail Marys, make a good act of contrition, and try not, and don't do it again.
And stop thinking about sister. No.
So yeah, that was probably about as crazy as it got. Although in high school, in my junior year, yeah, I got asked to be in a band. Cut back to sophomore year. They had a sophomore talent show, and by that time I had seen Chuck Berry, and I knew that that's what I wanted my life to be. I wanted to be Chuck Berry. And so, I saved up my little lawn mowing and snow shoveling money and went down to Sears and bought a $35 electric guitar. And I didn't have enough money for an amp, so I played it through my mother's tape recorder.
Interesting.
Yeah, wow. So I decided that to enter the sophomore talent show, but I didn't have an amp. But my best friend, John, his father had bought him a guitar and an amp. Now, the only problem there was that John was tone deaf.
Oh, no.
And I had to teach him note by note the songs we were going to play. And but he had the right hair, and he had the amp. So I got this guy, Henry. I taught him how to play my drums for the only 2 songs he ever played in his life, I think. And we went down to the Navy store, and we bought these shiny metallic black shirts and white jackets and black pants. And then we had a friend up in the spotlight booth, and we told him to put pink and purple gels on the spotlights. And of course, we were showbiz, whereas the only competition we had was there was this guy who was really a brilliant classical piano player named Germano Romano. And he was so good at high school. His hands were insured for $100,000. So he's really talented. And he's the one. Now, this one priest hated us because we played rock and roll. So he took 5 guys out of the marching band and put them together as a Dixieland band. Now, to rock kids of my generation, Dixieland was the lamest music it could be. So they got 0 votes. We got 296 out of 298. And poor Germano got 2 votes. So we won. So, we were under no illusion it was because we were any good. It's just we were playing the kind of songs that the kids like, So
whatever works.
Yeah, So, but as a result of that, I became I was allowed to sit at the head of the cool kids table in the lunchroom. So everybody wanted to be my friend after that.
Very nice.
Yeah.
You had caught the bug before that, though, right? As far as you said, you wanted to be like Chuck Berry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Chuck Berry's
big guys at the time wanted to be like Chuck Berry. Yeah,
a million guys. Keith Richards, everybody wanted to be Chuck Berry. You'd learn his licks. Yep.
You
play those songs. That.
But growing up in a household, you're the quintessential story of growing up in a entertainer household.
Correct.
So yeah, you probably were itching to get up there and get in front of people way before most people were.
Well, yeah, my mother used to take me down sometimes to the Perry Como show, and I'd watch the dress rehearsals, and I'd see all these famous people.
How old were you then?
Oh, I was 10, 11, maybe, something like that. And I got to sit in the dressing room where all the beautiful singers and dancers were in their underwear.
Wow.
And then we skip forward to the confession.
There you go.
They should have been the ones confessing, because those were some. They were perverts. Those girls, they'd kiss me and on my cheek and stuff, So I liked. I said, "This is show business." And then my mother had good taste in music. She brought home very hip records. She liked Sinatra. She liked Nancy Wilson. She liked Nat King Cole. Duke Ellington, and Luke Duke to this day, those are favorites of mine. So while I was listening to Chuck Berry and Fats Domino and, Little Richard and all that stuff, I was also listening to this adult music.
To the crooners. Yeah.
But it was hip adult, but it wasn't really square,
Right. Yeah, I'm a huge Rat Pack fan, so I'm with you there.
Yeah. So that was that. So I learned how to phrase from listening to Sinatra. In fact, some years later, when I made my first solo hit, a song called With Pen in Hand, Sinatra's best friend was friends with my manager at the time. And Jilly Rizzo was his name.
Uh-huh.
And Jilly comes to the session when I'm recording. And he says, this kid, he says, he's the only one I ever heard that can phrase better than this kid is Frank. I said, whoa, I guess I got something,
There you go.
And Jilly sort of became like a mini godfather to me in some ways. A couple of years later, or maybe a year later, I had a gig after I had a couple of hits in the late 60s. I get a gig up in Boston, and I was playing the Apollo Theater in New York with my partner Judy Clay.
Right.
And Jackie Wilson, who was dating my first wife's sister, came backstage to see me. And he said, where are you playing next? I said, well, I got this gig in Columbus, Ohio, and then from there I go to Boston. He said, oh, Boston, oh, man. I said, what, Jackie? What? He said, oh, man, Boston. He said, these gangsters up there, they'll come backstage and they'll tell the owner that they're your manager and take 25% of your pay. I said, what? I said, I'm not even making 25% of my pay after I pay my band and everything. I said, what do I do? And so I asked my manager, and he said, go see Jilly. So I go over to Jilly's. Jilly had a club,
Uh-huh.
So I go over there, I call him up, and he says, yeah, come over, kid. So I go over there, and he shows me around the club. He said, hey, see this table here? Yeah, only Frank sits there, So he says, I hear you're worried about Boston. I said, yeah, well, I don't want to lose money on the gig, He says, if anybody bothers you up there, you say this guy's name. He's from there.
Mm-hmm.
If they still bother you, say this name. He's from here. If they still bother you, say my name. And then he hands me a scrap of paper with a phone number on it. He said, this here's Little Joe. He said, Little Joe bodyguards Frank when he's in town. And all of a sudden, as if in a movie, this little guy, about 5'6", with a neck the size of your thigh, materializes from the wall. And he says, this here's Little Joe. Joe, if Billy Vera calls you, go wherever he says, do whatever he needs. So I get to Boston, and as it turned out, this gangster up there owned the club. And his son, who was about maybe 10, 12 years older than me, he thought I was the coolest thing, and he liked me. So I never had a problem in Boston, as it turned out. Never needed to call Little Joe.
Didn't have to call Little Joe.
No. So cut to 20 years later, now I'm riding high with my first and only real big hit at this moment. And we get a gig in Palm Springs where Sinatra lived. And of course, because of that, Jilly lived there.
Mm-hmm.
So we played this huge club in Palm Springs, knock on the dressing room door. This big guy with the crooked nose standing there with an armful of like 24 roses. And Jilly says he's sorry he couldn't make your show, but he wanted to give you these here roses, and he wants to tell you he still loves you, and the only one that can outphrase you still is Frank. So that was that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Your relationship, you mentioned Lou Rawls, your relationship with Lou Rawls. I was going to ask this later in the interview, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it now since you mentioned it. Tell us more about your relationship with him.
Well, after my record at this moment became big, a friend of mine back in New York was working for Blue Note Records, the jazz label. And they had just signed Lou Rawls. And so the boss there, Bruce Lundvall, who's a great music man, he said to Michael, he said, you want to produce Lou? He said, and Michael says, yeah, he said, but my friend Billy, he said, he's better with singers than I am, and he knows songs better than I do. So he'll pick you some great songs. And Bruce knew who I was. He said, yeah, and Billy writes good songs. He said, so, yeah, the two of you producing. So we did. And at the time, Lou was in a lower part of his record-selling career. He'd been making these lousy albums, like what I call Vegas disco albums. And they weren't selling at all. So Bruce had said to us, take him back to the kind of music that people originally loved him for, jazz, blues, make it a hip album. Don't go after the teenage market with Lou. He's 53 years old anyway, Yeah. So we hired we went back to New York to record him. And we hired all the best musicians we could get, man. We had Richard T., Cornell Dupree, Stanley Turrentine, all these fabulous, some of the best backup musicians in the world. And we made this album. He cut 4 of my songs on that album. And the album went to #1 on the jazz charts. And so we really brought back his career.
And that jump-started you as a producer. You started producing albums.
Yeah, not often, because, I like to make records the old-fashioned way, with everybody in the studio together. That I don't really go for this. You record the bass player on Thursday and you record the drummer next week. You don't get a feel that way. You don't get the honest, organic feeling of when people are playing off each other.
Understood. You mentioned that you were a songwriter, and again, a very good one. You've written for Fats Domino. You've written for the Shirelles. You've written for Ricky Nelson. Who are some of the people that you remember being great to work with as far as writing songs for them?
Well, you generally don't meet them, But I've had songs cut by.
Who are you pleased with what they did with your songs?
Well, and I'm not always pleased with who does my or the way they do it. But I loved Dolly Parton gave me a #1 record called "I Really Got the Feeling," and I was very pleased with that. Not only because it sold well, but because she did a great job on it. Bonnie Raitt did my song "Papa Come Quick" on her biggest album, and so I like the way she did that. In fact, there's a little story behind that. The day of recording, she called me up. She says, "I can't get my band to play like get the feeling of your demo. Can you come over and help them?" So she says, "Bring your guitar." So I go over there, the studio, and they were really good musicians, but they were playing too good. You know what I mean? I said, it's a simple song. It should be played dumb and simple. So she said, "Well, you tell them what to do." So essentially, I produced the track, without credit, but I didn't care. I just wanted to. She had just sold 3 million records. I wanted to be on the next album.
I think that's a technical advisor credit, isn't it?
Something like that, So I told the drummer, I said, "Look, put your hands in your pocket. Don't use your sticks. Just play thump, thump, thump on your bass drum." And I told the bass player similar things. And then I played my little stupid guitar, the way I play. And Bonnie played a lick that my guitar player had taught her. And it came out great. And so, "Papa Come Quick" became a good song on the biggest album that Bonnie ever had. Robert Plant cut one of my songs. I'd had a song back in the 60s, when I was a staff songwriter at a publisher. And the job of a staff songwriter is you write songs every day, and they pay you a little advance, weekly, and then they deduct that, from your sales. Or sometimes your boss will come in and he'll say, "The Shirelles are recording next week. Write something for them." Or "Tony Bennett's recording next week. See if you can write something for him." And so you try to tailor a song to that singing, that person's style, or the subject matter that they like to sing about, So he came in one day and said Chuck Jackson is recording. Chuck Jackson was the great soul singer of the period, and I was a fan. So I said, well, Chuck, he hasn't had a hit in a while, and he's gotten kind of stale. And I said, what can I write for him that might light a fire under him? I said, he's got that great husky voice. Maybe I'll do something where he could preach. And there was a record I liked at the time by the blues singer Little Junior Parker called Driving Wheel. And in the middle, he uses a device whereby the song just stops and he preaches like he's in a Baptist church. And I said, let me do something like that and throw that in there. So I used that. Well, it ended up, long story short, Chuck didn't record the song, but my publisher took it to Epic Records, where they had just signed this new band from New England called The Remains. And they cut it, and they made a totally different record than how I envisioned it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was great. And I thought, man, I'm going to have a big record here. It's going to be a hit. Well, it wasn't a hit. So, a couple of years later, I'm down in the village at a record store, and this guy behind the counter recognized me, and he said, hey, Billy, I know where there's a bunch of your old albums, for 69 cents a piece. I said, well,
Ouch.
they are, man. I can sell them in the clubs, if I have to. So he told me, and he said, by the way, I used a song of yours on a compilation album I made called Nuggets. And it didn't sell much, but people, in my group, in my friends, just loved that record.
Mm-hmm.
And it was "Don't Look Back," the same song I had written for Chuck, that the Remains recorded. So I was flattered, but it didn't make me any money. So cut to 20 years later, I got At This Moment happening, and I get a phone call one day from Cyndi Lauper's husband.
Okay.
He said, Cindy just cut a track on your song "Don't Look Back." She wants to do a duet with Joan Jett. I said, "Wow, this will be great, man! It's gonna be a good record. It'll sell great." Well, it never got released.
Oh.
So wait, it gets worse.
Oh no.
Cut to a few months later, somebody mails me a promo CD of Robert Plant's new album. Got 4 songs on it, one of which is "Don't Look Back." And I said, wow, Robert Plant, man, I bet he did a great job with it, well, the album comes out, and my song's not on the album.
Oh.
So now I think the Malocchio is on my song, man. It's like jinxed.
It's like the Macbeth of songs.
Yeah, And cut to another 20 years, 40 years after I wrote the song, Rhino puts out an expanded version of the Nuggets album as a box set, and it sells a shitload of records, man. And so 40 years later, the song starts making money. And then 6 months later, they put out a Robert Plant box set, and it sells a shitload of records. My song's on there. So now the song has become a sort of a minor, rock classic, Well,
again, and hey, if you make the money now or if you make the money yesterday, it's still money in the bank.
Well, that goes back to something my songwriting mentor, Chip Taylor, taught me. Chip was a staff songwriter at the same publishing company. He was a few years old. He went to Stepinac High School too, but 4 years ahead of me. His brother, the actor John Voight, he was about 6 years older than me. And anyway, so Chip said to me, he said, forget about trendy songs, forget that stuff. It comes and goes. He said, the way to make real money in songwriting is try to write songs that you can imagine people singing 20 years from now. He said, that's where and he was really right. You know.
That is a great lead-in for what I'm going to do next. I'm going to have Renee play a clip of you singing "At This Moment," which is your most recognized song.
Yeah.
So if Renee can do that for us. Oh,
Awesome.
that's the other one. That's the one we're going to talk about that one later.
The Tonight Show.
Yeah.
So that's the song that's queued up. Remember, so I was saying that's the one we have to do first because there's an order. It's
okay.
The way
Well,
that it's queued up.
Let's do both of the songs together. This one you actually sang in the movie with Bruce Willis.
Blind Date.
Yeah, Blind Date and Kim Basinger.
Yeah.
Night blooming jazz, softest perfume. Sycamore trees, they hide it safe with the moon. Way down the street, I hear our favorite old song. Oh, what a night. Oh, what a night. Oh, what a night. What a lovely night. Oh, what a night to be without you.
So again, later I want to talk about your movies and what you did in the movies, but let's play At This Moment now. We'll give her a second to cue that up.
Yeah, it just takes a second because I got to bring that one down. So I'll play it in like 20 seconds. It's just a technical.
Now, this was not a big hit when you first released it, but later they were using it on a TV show with Michael J. Fox, Family Ties.
That is correct.
And then it shot up to #1 on the charts.
That's right. Sure did, boy. Oh, this clip is the earliest clip of me doing that song.
Thank you. This next one is called At This Moment. What did you think I would do at this moment when you're standing before me with tears in your eyes, trying to tell me that you found your another? You just don't love me no more.
Yeah. This brings back so many memories for me. I used to host karaoke when I was younger. And again, I mean, there was almost never a show where somebody wouldn't get up and sing that. That's got to feel great to you, knowing that for hundreds of years on, your legacy, people are going to be singing your songs.
Yeah, I mean, that one really is reached the status of a standard now.
I don't think there's anybody on the planet that doesn't know that song when they hear it. They go, "Oh yeah, I know that one."
The strange thing about it was at the time it was out, it crossed every demographic. It was big on the pop charts, of course, but it was also big on the rhythm and blues and the country charts and the adult contemporary charts. I mean,
it's big in China. I lived in China for 14 years. It's huge over there.
Get out of here! Really?
It is.
Wow.
It is. They all know it over there too.
Trouble is they don't pay.
You got to go over there. You got to do some concerts.
Really come back probably. But yeah, and we have, of course, had a lot of covers on the song. Tom Jones did it on a big hit album of his. Rita Coolidge, Freda Payne, Michael Bublé sold about 12 million records of his album that he did it on. So, yeah,
I'm sure you're always checking in with him.
yeah. Well, luckily those checks come every 5 or 6 months, like clockwork thing.
So yeah, the Beaters were born in the 70s, right?
1979.
Yeah.
I moved in.
And I can't read my own notes here. Oh, it's just the same thing. It charted at number 39 and 79.
The first record was that we made as the Beaters.
I Can Take Care of Myself.
Take Care of Myself, and it was a mid-chart record.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, at this moment was the follow-up. And what had happened was the promotion man got into a bit of a disagreement, shall we say, with the guy that was the boss, and quit. So they had nobody to promote the record, and it only went to number 79. And then shortly after that, the Japanese who owned the company, they pulled the plug on the American version of the company.
I'm sorry, what was the name of that company again? The record company?
Alpha, ALFA.
Alpha. Right.
They were a big company in Japan,
Mm-hmm.
but they weren't happy with the way it was being run here. So they pulled the plug, as I said, and so we were without a record deal for the next 5 years. And at that stage, I was sort of eking out a living, doing acting and stuff.
Right. Right. Now, Rhino Records actually kind of came to your rescue, and have been really good to you as far as keeping your songs out there and keeping it in where you've got checks coming in.
Yeah. Well, I used to, and I still do, used to have a periodic lunch with the founder of Rhino, Richard Foos. And we'd have these lunches where we would sort of have these mock arguments, about, minutia, like whose version of Mustang Sally is the best, that kind of stuff. So at one of these lunches, I told him about Family Ties and how I had gotten a bunch of mail from NBC. Mm-hmm. I had had songs on other TV shows before that, but never got mail, because usually they're in the background and nobody really pays attention. But this one, was noticeable. So I said, Richard, I said, maybe if we put out at this moment and maybe an album of my best of the Alpha stuff, maybe we can sell a few records. I said, what do you need to sell to break even? He said, well, we could probably break even. We got low overhead here at Rhino, a couple of thousand. I said, I'll guarantee you 2,000. I'll sell them in the clubs if I have to. And he did it only because he likes me,
Well, these are the guys that released re-released Bill Shatner and Leonard Nimoy's albums. They brought the Big Boppers album back, after the 50s.
Yeah, all kinds of crazy records. As Gary, the late Gary Stewart, who worked there, said one time, he said, this is probably the only record that Rhino had put out that wasn't released as a joke.
It wasn't a gag record.
Yeah.
Wasn't played on Dr. Demento.
Exactly. By the way, I was just at his house the other day, Demento. He's selling off his collection, and I was out there buying records from him.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he's a great guy. So anyway.
Brought Weird Al Yankovic to fame.
Yeah. Anyway, so Rhino puts out the record, and by the time they got it out, we had missed the reruns on Family Ties. So, but as luck would have it, they used the song again the following season when the girl breaks up with Michael J. Fox. And this time the story of the song, Boy Loses Girl, is the same as the story of the episode, Boy Loses Girl. And America just connected with it in a very organic, insane way. And NBC told us that they had more phone calls than...
It was so powerful that Michael J. Fox actually married that actress. So they have you to thank for that.
Well, I don't know how much they're thanking me these days, because he said every time they walk into a club or a restaurant and my song comes on, they just cringe. They're we always say they're over it.
Too much.
Yeah, overkill. So
like working in a store, and that's on the speaker in the store all the time.
Market or in the elevator, So it's just become this standard, and I'm forever grateful for it. It changed my life basically, because I was 42 years old by that time. Don't forget.
Yeah.
So,
Well, but you went on to do voiceover work in cartoons. You worked on Rugrats. You worked on Johnny Bravo, Cow and Chicken. You were doing some stuff for the Cartoon Network for a while.
yeah, I did some of that, but most of my voiceover work was doing commercials and
Hmm.
what they call network promos.
Yeah.
In other words, you know, watch The Nanny tonight at 8/7 Central on NBC. I did all of CBS's comedies for 5 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I did promos for all the networks, actually NBC, ABC, Fox, all of them.
So you were Don Pardo for a while.
Kinda, yeah. It was for the top voiceover guy for those about 20 years. It was me and a guy named Don LaFontaine.
Yeah, I recognize the name.
Well, Don did all the voice of God spots.
The lower voice.
You know, in a world. You know, that was Don.
He's at it again, James Bond.
Yeah, he was the best at that. And I did the more lighthearted stuff, you know. Except that when NBC brought me in there, a guy that worked at CBS first, that I'd worked for at CBS, he moved over to NBC. He called me up. He said, "Listen, I got an idea. I'd like to use you over here." He said, "But we got this thing coming on Saturday nights. We call it the Saturday Night Trilogy, and it's all creepy shows." He said, "Can you do a real creepy voice?" I said, "Can I do a creepy voice?" He said, "You're the guy." So I did all their creepy shows.
Mr. Rizzo.
Yeah. I did all the creepy shows for NBC for a while.
Oh, funny.
Yeah. So I made more money doing voiceovers than I ever made in the music business.
Oh, I can imagine. It's supposed to be huge business, especially now.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people are trying to sell that. You know, we can tell you how to make voiceover. We can tell you how to do voiceover work. I'm seeing a lot of those ads now.
But you know, the joke of it was I didn't go after it. You know, it's what my dad did for a living.
Yeah.
As you know, he was a staff announcer on NBC. He also did quiz shows. You know, they say his name was Bill McCord, and you know, the host would say, "Well, Bill McCord, who's our next guest?" "Well, Jack, our next guest is a housewife from Newark, New Jersey." You know, he'd be that guy. You know.
So the apple didn't fall far from the tree.
I got it, you know, because when I was a little kid, sometimes he'd take me down to NBC with him, and I'd sit there and watch him do them. And so I called him for advice when I started, because the way I got voiceovers was I was doing a radio show playing old R&B records once a week, and it became very popular in LA. One day I go into the station, and there's a note in my mailbox that said, "He's got an interesting voice. You believe him when he talks. Would he be interested in doing voiceovers?" Well, I had an expensive wife at the time, and I kind of desperate for money. And I said, "I'll try anything at this point."
I heard Burt Ward from Batman had the same problem.
Yeah. So did O.J. Simpson, but he had a way out of it in a different way. But the first one I did was a Nissan spot, and my phone starts ringing off the hook. "Hey, you want to do one here?" I said, "Yeah, I better get an agent." You know, I didn't have an agent. And so I did, and I started really doing well right away. And of course, so I called my dad, and I said, "You got any advice for me?" He said, "Yeah, show up early, work quickly, have no opinions, and don't give anybody any crap." And of course, what that meant was they don't care what you think. They don't care what you think of the spot. You know, because there was one big voice guy, a Don LaFontaine type of voice at CBS, and he had a wonderful voice, great big voice. But sometimes he get a little attitude, you know. And so one day he's in there and he says, "I can't read this. The grammar is incorrect." And he goes on, and he's taking up all this time, and these guys got to get these things out fast, you know.
Right.
So I take him out in the hall. I said, "Chuck," I said, "Look, man, we're stealing money here. You know, it's just like this job is like taking candy from a baby. We're
talking for 30 seconds. We're making big paychecks."
Just read what's on the paper. If it's wrong, they'll bring us back next week or tomorrow and pay us again.
Yeah. I had the same situation in China with a guy because, well, over there, the grammar's not always correct.
I bet.
But you have to read it the way it's written, because if you say something about it, it causes the person who wrote it to lose face, as they say over there.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's a big deal over there. So I learned real fast over there. Yeah, don't just read it the way it's written, and don't say anything about it.
Do what they want, but they do not care. I realize that because, like, if I'm producing a record, do I care what the bass player thinks? I don't.
True.
I mean, I might ask him his opinion on something, but in the end, I'm the producer. It's my call. Well, when I'm doing voiceovers for Joe Blow over here, it's his call, and I'm just a whore. I go in there.
Yes, we are.
Say the word, go home, wait for the check.
Yes, we are. Now, speaking of whoring yourself out, no. What I was going to segue into was you actually wrote TV theme songs. That was another thing that you've been able to supplement your income with.
Let me say, I sang them. Chip and I wrote one for a show that lasted 3 episodes. So that didn't do so well. But I did one.
But you've got credits on The King of Queens, which is a popular show, right? And some other shows.
So yeah, I did Empty Nest first, and that lasted 4 years.
Yeah.
And then I did King of Queens, which lasted 9 years, and is on right now somewhere as we speak.
Yes.
Which I'm getting paid.
Awesome.
I mean, if you get the same union scale as the actors get, not the stars, but the day players. So, and you get that every time. And that's 9 years worth of shows. That's a lot of shows, dude.
That's a lot of shows. And then syndication, we'll just keep running. That's good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You were actually on Into the Night with Rick Dees.
Yeah, the way that happened was Rick and I had the same management team.
Okay.
Guy named Jim Morey, Sandy Gallen and Jim Morey. They managed Dolly Parton, Neil Diamond, some real big names. And I was one of the low end guys on the totem pole. And Rick was one of the top disc jockeys in LA, and a very good disc jockey.
Right.
But his dream, like a lot of people that do one thing well, they want to do something else.
He wanted to conquer TV.
Comedians want to do drama, and dancers want to sing, and all that. He wanted to be Johnny Carson. So Jim said, "Well, it's my job to make his dream come true." So he pitches Rick to do a late night show on ABC, and they do their vetting, which is basically they have something called TVQ, which sort of it's an algorithm of some sort which figures out your popularity, your name value, all that. And Rick's TVQ wasn't quite high enough nationally. He had a very high TVQ in LA, but not nationally. So Jim was a very bright guy. He said, nobody's ever had a house band that was already known. He said, so he pitched us as the house band.
Right.
So they vetted us, and it turned out that my TVQ nationally was higher than Rick's. So, and Jim said,
so Doc Severinsen was more famous than Johnny.
Well, but Jim said, if you ever tell anybody, I'll deny it. So ABC did their algorithms again, and then they decided that the combination of his TVQ and mine was enough to give a shot to a late night show. So we did a show, and it wasn't great. It wasn't a great show. But it lasted a year. And we did well there. I co-wrote. I did a Paul Anka. I co-wrote the theme song, which meant I got paid every night for that. and my band, for the first time, the Beaters actually made a regular paycheck for the first time in the history of the Beaters. So they all got new cars and, and did well, and I did pretty good too. And so it was good while it lasted. The problem was that Rick, being a top 40 disc jockey, his idea of a guest was somebody with their first hit record that nobody ever heard of. And the kind of people that watch TV late at night, young people are out, man. They're out being kids.
Yeah.
And so you got your mom and pop watching late at night, and they don't give a shit about, Kool Moe Dee or whoever these people are.
Right.
So I tried to help. I said, look, you should maybe have some acts that appeal to grown-ups.
There you go.
Let's bring on Frankie Valli. Let's bring on Merle Haggard. Let's bring on Lou Rawls. Let's bring on
movie stars that just had their movies out. Yeah.
Well, that's what you always get them.
Yeah.
Whoever has the movie, but I'm thinking music for music stuff.
For the music guests. Yeah.
People that grown-ups heard of. And okay, maybe so they kind of gave in to me, and they maybe once a week they put on somebody that the grown-ups heard of, But it was a lot of fun. We got to work my old pal Dion DiMucci, who I knew since I was, first starting out in clubs at 18, and I got Lou on there.
Yeah.
And of course, the problem was with these grown-up acts is Rick really didn't know how to interview them. His interviewing style was, well, so how does it feel to have your first hit record? Kid. Well,
the radio interview is much different from TV interview.
Yeah, right, exactly. So if he got somebody of any substance on there, he really didn't know how to talk to them, And I remember one time, you remember the show The Jeffersons?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the little guy that played George Jefferson.
Sherman Hemsley, right?
Sherman, yeah, he was a guest. So the research told Rick that Sherman liked music. So Rick, Sherman, I guess I hear you like music. Who's your favorite singer? And he got real excited. He said, "Oh, I love Little Jimmy Scott." Well, Little Jimmy Scott is one of the greatest jazz singers of all time. That nobody knows Little Jimmy Scott except me and Joe Pesci, Frankie Valli, who the three of us idolized Jimmy Scott. So Rick looked like a deer caught in the headlights, And
he didn't know.
So he never heard of him. So whenever something like that happened, he'd throw it to me, and so that I'd be embarrassed instead of him. So he says, "Well, Billy, you ever heard of Little Jimmy Scott?" And so I start singing, "Everybody's somebody's fool," which was Jimmy's only hit. And so Sherman jumps up out of the couch. He runs all the way across the studio, throws his arms around me, says, "I love you, man. I love you, man." And Rick's like, "Oh." Well, the coolest part was I get a letter at the station, like, a few days later, came from Jimmy's wife back in Newark. Jimmy was like down on his luck. He's living in some crummy neighborhood in Newark, New Jersey.
Oh, man.
Which is just about any neighborhood in Newark, New Jersey. And New Jersey's a great place. Love it.
You're from Jersey? Which exit?
So she said she told Jimmy when he came home that night, he was so happy that somebody said his name on television, national television, that he cried. And I was so touched by that. And I got to meet him, and we became really dear friends, Jimmy and I.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I was asked to sing at his 85th birthday some years later, and I just loved him. He was one of these really old school showbiz guys. He was probably big and not big. He was never big, but his career was started in like the late 40s, and through the early 50s. Mm-hmm. And all the hip people knew Jimmy Scott. Let's put it that way. You know, the hip jazz people, and I just loved him to death. He was just a wonderful guy. And then of course he was a little guy who had a very high voice, like a girl.
Okay.
And because he had something called Kalman's syndrome, which was not a disease, but a thing where
It's something that's there.
he didn't grow up to be more than 5 feet tall.
Oh, okay.
His voice never changed. And so, you know, when I met Nancy Wilson, you know, I knew that she liked him. So I said, tell me about how you feel about Jimmy Scott. He said, oh, she said, Jimmy Scott. She said, there would be no Nancy Wilson were it not for Jimmy Scott. She said, I got most of my style from listening to little Jimmy Scott. And he said, we're from Northern Ohio, you know, and so, you know, that led to some really cool stuff. That became how I became friends with Joe Pesci. You know, he came.
Oh, you're friends with Joe Pesci, huh?
Yeah, I love that guy, man. Whenever he's in town, he comes to my gigs.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and he's a hell of a singer, by the way.
Really?
Oh my God, yeah. And I don't throw compliments like that around easily. He's a hell of a singer in the Jimmy Scott style, you know, which is laid back from the beat, real.
Well, I'm sure a lot of our viewers are going to be looking up Jimmy Scott tonight on YouTube and in various places. And I'm definitely going to look up Joe Pesci to see if there's any singing videos out there.
Oh yeah, he's on. Joey's on, man, and he sings his ass off.
Renee, there is a picture I want you to flash up if you can. We're going to talk about something that I'm very fond of. I was doing research on you this week, and it just hit me that you're in one of my favorite movies ever. There's Team Bonzai from The Adventures of Buckaroo Bonzai across the eighth dimension. And over on the right-hand side there with the thin tie and the pink shirt is our man Billy Vera as Pinky Carruthers.
Yeah, man. My claim to fame, dude.
And that's Peter Weller before he became RoboCop. That's Jeff Goldblum before he became famous with The Fly in Jurassic Park. I mean, there was a lot of talent there.
Clancy Brown, third from
Clancy Brown. You actually auditioned for Clancy Brown's part, didn't you?
I did. Yeah. They came in. The director and some of the people involved in the movie came into a club I was playing at. They heard about me, and so they watched the set of us, and they asked me to come over to the table afterwards. And the director, Rick Richter, was his name, W.D. Richter, really sweet guy. He said, man, I love the way you improv up there. He said, you done any acting? I said, well, I've done some plays. I've done a couple of TV shows. You know, never did a movie. He said, well, man, he said, I'd love to have you in our movie. You know, he said, you know, you're just so loose up there, man. You know, the way you improv. Said, well, cool,
so you became part of Buckaroo Bonzai's band.
Yeah.
And not just you, but one of your players, one of the beaters.
The late Jerry Peterson, who we lost last year from COVID. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Jerry was
he had incredible hair.
He had a great big.
He had 80s hair, man.
I call him La Cabeza de Vaca, the head of the bull, the cow.
If you watch the movie, the part where they're doing the band number before Peter Weller reaches out to Penny Pretty.
Yeah, Ellen Barkin.
You'll see him playing the saxophone, and you're playing bass actually.
Yeah, a pink
because
bass.
Buckaroo is playing guitar.
Playing a pink bass, no less. We had a coach Peter on guitar. I brought my guitar player over, who's a great guitar player, Ricky, and we went up to Peter's house. I mean, Peter's a good musician. He plays a mini trumpet,
which he plays in that scene, yeah,
and he plays it quite well. He went to the same university, North Texas State, as one of the guys in my band, which is they have a great jazz department. So Peter knows his music. He just never had played guitar before. So.
We have a clip, actually. This is probably your grandest moment in the movie.
Can I help you?
Hello, Buckaroo Bonzai.
You a messenger? What you got here?
No, wait a minute. I need to see Buckaroo Bonzai in person. My name is John Parker. Identify yourself now.
Blue Blazer regular, Pinky Carruthers. Sorry, John, everybody needs to see Buckaroo. Later.
How many people in that movie got to say their full name and call themselves part of Buckaroo's team in the same line?
The same line. Now, what you don't see and got cut out of that scene was it's a high fence, as you can tell.
Right.
Why am I up that high? Because I am standing on the saddle of a horse.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And
because when you're at Graceland, that's what happens.
that's what happens, dude. Yeah. So I was told I had to ride a horse for this scene. So I got this actress that I was seeing. I said, "Can you teach me how to ride a horse?" She took me out for a couple of lessons. I didn't become a great jockey or anything like that, but so I get to the scene that night because it was a night shoot, and the wranglers, the guys that handle the horses, I said, yeah. I said, well, yeah, I took a couple lessons, so I guess I could be okay. They said, you didn't need to take any lessons. So these are movie star horses. You can stand on top of and they can sense when you're about to fall, and they won't let you fall. I said, wow. Pretty cool. Yeah. So it would have been really funny if they had done a quick cut behind the wall, and you see me standing on top of this horse.
Well, and I saw in another interview you were talking about you felt that the movie had been cut a little too much. A lot of the humor and the timing of the humor had been kind of trimmed.
Yeah, they cut a half hour out of the movie because the powers that be at 20th Century Fox, they thought it was going to be such a huge hit that they wanted it to play 5 times a day in the theaters.
Oh.
So they said,
showbiz.
Yeah, and so yeah, and a lot of people involved with the movie felt that jokes need space,
right?
For the laugh.
Timing.
You ever heard of the Coasters?
Yeah.
Charlie Brown, Yakety Yak. I played behind them dozens of times back in the 60s, and I was friends with them. I learned all my comic timing from the Coasters. They were one of the great in-person acts, and they were so funny, man. God, I could probably do 75% of their act to this day by
and as we are over time, I'm going to have to call it quits here, and I really don't want to. I really want to just talk to you all night. But you are still playing your band, and you are still playing out in South California.
Yeah, whenever we get a gig, yeah.
Yeah. So where can we see you in the near future? If are there any gigs?
We just played our first post-COVID gig 2 weeks ago at Vitello's in Studio City.
Mm-hmm.
Real good club, and we're waiting on confirmation for one at a place called the Canyon Club, which is about 30 miles north of LA.
Okay.
So waiting on those.
So call the Canyon Club. Tell them you want to see Billy Vera.
Yeah.
And we have a question from the audience about your songwriting process. If you have any advice for songwriters.
Well, I'll tell you what the great Chip Taylor told me when I was young. Besides the part about try to write songs that you picture people singing 20 years from now, is when you're writing a lyric, try to write a song. It's like a short story. It must have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Mm-hmm. Boy meets girl, boy seduces girl or gets close to girl, boy loses girl. Beginning, middle, end. So that's always good to know. Although so much nowadays the lyrics don't really matter that much.
Yeah.
But if you want to write a song that'll last, those are the kind of songs that have legs, as they say in the business. Just try to write songs. Try to come up with melodies or chords that you haven't heard a million times. Try to come up with something fresh. That's what I do anyway. I'll bang on the piano until something sounds different, because I like, people respond, I think, to that which is different. Now other people have different ideas. You know who Bob Gaudio is? The guy from the wrote all the hits for the Four Seasons. He told a friend of mine who wrote a lot of hits also. He said, Larry, you want to write a hit? The best way to write a hit is to start with one. In other words, steal a melody and adapt it a little bit.
That's what Vanilla Ice did.
That's what Vanilla Ice did from Under Pressure. He went to court over it. Yeah.
And Eric Clapton with 12 million blues songs.
Sure. Well, and John Lennon said the greatest songwriters are the greatest thieves.
Yeah. It's true. It's really true.
And they couldn't read music. I found that today, actually.
That one line in his song, "Here Come Old Flat Top," which is right out of a Chuck Berry song.
Oh, man.
The key is, if you're going to do that, and if you're going to use that method, then do something to make it different. So that it's not too much like the one you're inspired by, shall we say.
Well, thank you. This has been so wonderful. Renee, my producer, I'm sure is going to reach out to you, because my boss is another interviewer. His name is Dennis Tardani. He's from Texas. And I'm sure they're going to want to talk to you some more. And again, I hope we get you back on the show again real soon.
Please, everyone in the audience is asking for you to come back. Please,
Yes,
Billy,
they
say
love
yes,
you,
say
Billy.
yes, say yes.
Come back, buy my new CD. It's called Timeless. Buy my autobiography. It's called Harlem to Hollywood. Go see the documentary they did on me. It's called Harlem to Hollywood. And if you want to read a novel that I wrote, it's called A Dollop of Toothpaste. So
Awesome.
With a racy cover.
Yes.
That is awesome. Thank you, Billy. Thank you.
And one thing
Thank you so
more.
much.
I'm glad I remembered to plug myself.
Yeah, you got to plug
We try to
yourself.
be conducive to that.
Yes, thank you, Billy.
And one thing more, this episode is dedicated to mine and Renee and Rory's dear friend Fred Bowman, and to the memory of his father Harold Bowman, who
His father passed
gained
away.
his wings and left this world today.
Oh,
Fred, we're thinking about you and we love you, man.
yeah. Sorry to hear that.
Okay. We love you, Billy. We hope to see you again real soon.
Love you more, as the kids say.
Thank you, Billy. I sent you a friend request. Accept me, please.
And I'll see you around Clubhouse.
You betcha.
Love you, Billy. Thank you.